So welcome along to the Life Without Barriers webinar for August. This is one of my favourite parts of my job, getting to chat with people about potentially becoming a foster carer. So to invite you in and start the evening off, I'd like you to see if you can find the chat box and let us know which suburb you're zooming in from this evening. So to find the chat box, there's a couple of different ways it might look on your screen. It might be down the bottom in a little toolbar with a chat box looking icon, or it might be up the top. You might have to go to the three dots on the right hand side and there's a chat option down there. So just have a little look, and when you're ready, let us know which suburb you are from across Melbourne. Welcome, Natasha, who's from Point Cook over in the west. Lovely, very familiar with Point Cook, and we spend a little bit of time over there with some carers and clients we have out that way. So welcome along. If anyone else is comfortable sharing which suburb they're coming in from, that would be lovely, just to get a bit of a sense of where everyone is. No pressure, of course. And what I like to do at this time is just give everyone a few minutes to come in. So sometimes people struggle with Zoom, struggle with technology. So we just give them a couple of minutes to come on in. So wherever you are across Melbourne, I hope you have kept warm today. I know that I'm wearing my scarf. I've got a blanket across my lap. It's definitely been a little bit of a rude shock because we had a couple of nice days and then suddenly it all went back to winter, just to remind us that it's still cold. So I'll just give everyone a couple of minutes grace to see if they might calm along, and then we will get started. But lovely to have some representation from over in the west. We're always really hoping to recruit and accredit some new foster carers over there. So it's a couple of minutes past 6, so I will just get started this evening, and we will see how we go with some other people coming into the session as well. So welcome to this webinar. Really excited to speak with you a little bit about foster care and everything that's involved in becoming a foster carer, if that's what you're interested in doing. So before I really kind of dive in and talk about information, it's really important that we acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land that we're meeting on today and pay our respects to their elders past, present and emerging. So I am zooming in from Ascot Vale in Victoria this evening. So the traditional custodians of the land I'm on is the Wurundjeri people. And I know across Metro Melbourne, there's also land of the Boon Wurrung people as well. So just acknowledging those traditional custodians. So a little bit of introductions. You are going to hear a lot of my voice tonight, so I apologise for that in advance. Hopefully it's informative, even if it is a little bit annoying to listen to my voice. My name's Hannah and I'm the Carer Practice Manager here at Life Without Barriers Victoria. It's my pleasure and privilege to oversee the team who recruit, train and accredit new foster carers across Victoria at Life Without Barriers. And I'll be speaking for the most of this evening. I do have my very trusty sidekick Louise with me. Lou, would you like to just introduce yourself to the group? Oh, just on mute there, Lou.
I'm so sorry. I put myself on mute because I have a puppy just running around in the background with a bottle. Sorry. I'm Louise, the Care Engagement Officer. So if you do decide to go forward this evening and you click on the link at the end, then I'll be the person that will take you through the next part of the process and answer any questions, queries you may have.
Thanks, Lou. And Lou's underselling herself there. She's a magician and wonderful at answering questions and really good at helping people understand if foster care is right for them. So we're very lucky to have her. So it'll be Lou and I kind of steering you through this evening. So a little bit of housekeeping for tonight. If you do have questions throughout the presentation I'm about to give, please pop them into the chat box. It's really important that we answer all of your questions and you leave here tonight knowing more information than when you arrived. Of course, we want to respect your confidentiality. So for really personal or specific questions about your situation, you might choose to ask those questions of us privately, and we'll give you some options about how to continue the conversation with us privately at the end of the presentation as well. So let's talk about what we're going to talk about. That's always a nice thing to do at the start of a presentation, isn't it? So what we're really going to do this evening is work through these steps. So we're going to talk about who is Life Without Barriers, which is the agency that myself and Louise work for. We'll talk about what foster care is. It's an important thing for you to know if you want to become a foster carer. We will talk about where more foster carers are needed, the different types of foster care. There are different types. We will talk about the children in care and some of the stories that we hear from care, from children and carers. We'll talk about who can be a carer, and hopefully you'll find out that you can be a carer. We'll also work through some of the frequently asked questions that we hear all the time from people who are wanting to become foster carers. And then we'll talk to you a little bit about, if you do decide that this is for you, where to from here. So we'll give you some of those options at the end of the presentation as well. So we've got a lot to cover, but I promise it won't take too long. So let's get started. So firstly, who is Life Without Barriers? And you might hear me say LWB. I promise they're the same thing, Life Without Barriers and LWB. We are a massive organisation across Australia, and we work in hundreds of different communities in a number of different service areas. So obviously we work with lots of children and young people in foster care. We work with people who have disability. We work with refugees and asylum seekers, and we also work with Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islanders as well across Australia. So thinking about what foster care is, it is for children who need time away from their family, and it provides those children a safe and supportive home where they can heal and grow. So foster care might be for one night, it might be for a week, it might be for a year, it might be for several years. So it really depends on the child and their circumstances. What I can tell you is that foster care, at the heart of it, it's temporary care. So in the state of Victoria, the aim is to reunify children with their families of birth. That's really the underlying thing that we're trying to do, where that's safe and appropriate. So around Australia at any given time, there's around 50,000 children unable to live safely at home with their parents. So we're always looking for foster carers all around Australia. So where are more foster carers needed? The short answer is everywhere, and we just have a little map of Australia to explore that in a bit more detail. You can see that there's definitely foster carers needed all around the country. If you look down to little old Victoria at the bottom here, you'll see that on any given day, there's around 1,500 children needing foster care across our state, and around 7,000 children living in kinship or relative care. And what I mean by that is maybe they're not able to live with their mum or dad, but they might be living with grandma or an auntie or an older sibling. So you'll see that the numbers are much larger for children in relative and kinship care in Victoria. And that's because we do have that focus on keeping families together where we can. So a little bit about the different types of foster care. There are lots of different types because we need lots of different types of carers. So the first care type I'll let you know about is respite care. So this is anything up to 7 nights in a row, and it is usually planned in advance. It might take place on a weekend or perhaps for a week during the school holidays. And what respite care does is it provides a break for full-time foster carers. So there might be a child who's in a placement, a long-term placement with foster carers, and maybe they're going to a wedding this weekend. Maybe they're not in lockdown. And the wedding invitation says no children allowed. So those foster carers can still go off to the wedding, and they can know that the child will be placed into care with some respite carers, some safe and appropriate people. So what that does is it gives the long-term foster carers a break. It also allows the child an opportunity to go and stay in a different house and meet different carers and be part of their family, and to mix in different social networks, eat different food, and ultimately learn that there are lots of adults that really care about them. So respite care is a really nice, warm and fuzzy one, I think. If we look across the pond here to emergency care, it's quite different to respite care. It's normally not planned in advance, as the name sort of suggests. It is where children really need immediate urgent care right now. So the call for emergency carers might come at 3 in the morning, it might come at 3 in the afternoon, or it might come on any of the hours in between those. And it is anywhere for up to 4 weeks at a time. So it might be for one night, it might be for 4 weeks, it might be anywhere in between. So that's a little bit about emergency care. Then there's short-term care, which is anywhere up to 6 months at a time. And short-term care is often needed when difficult situations are being resolved at home. It might be needed while plans are looked at to identify longer-term solutions for the child. Where can they go and stay long term? But like all of the different care types, short-term care needs to feel safe and stable for children to heal and to keep building on their relationships with their family, especially if the plan is for them to go back to family and be reunified with them. We want to give that the best chance of success, so helping them to build those relationships and keep them strong. So that's a little bit about short-term care. And then, of course, we've got long-term care, which is anything from 6 months and up. So it might be 6 months and 1 day, and it might be 10 years. It really could be anything. So long-term carers, what we're seeking from them is really a commitment to supporting children towards adulthood. It really focuses on creating a sense of stability for the child and young person, and it doesn't necessarily mean forever. So there's no guarantees in foster care. Sometimes long-term care does mean forever. Sometimes children still go home back to their families after years in foster care. It really just depends on that child and their family and those circumstances. So hopefully that's given you a little bit of insight into some of the different care types that we have in Victoria. Obviously, when it comes to fostering, no two children or families are the same, and for that reason, no two placements are the same either. Sometimes they might be a few nights long, sometimes they might be many years long. It really, again, just depends on the individual circumstances of the child. So let's talk a little bit about the Life Without Barriers approach to foster care. So to guide all of the work that we do and all of the decisions that we make day to day at Life Without Barriers in foster care, we use an evidence-informed therapeutic model of care that's got a really easy name to remember. It's called CARE. And there are 6 underlying principles of care, which I'm just very briefly going to speak to for you now. So the first principle is that it's relationship-based. So it recognises that children need trusting, meaningful relationships with the adults who care for them so that they can build social confidence and emotional confidence as children, and that will serve them really well into their adulthood as well. The next is that it's developmentally focused. So it recognises that we really need to meet children where they're at developmentally and make sure that we're using strategies that challenge the child but that don't overwhelm them. So it's really about meeting them exactly where they are at the moment. It's also trauma informed. And what that means is that we're always considering the impact that trauma can have on a child's development. And as the adults in the situation, we are then modifying our expectations and interactions accordingly so that we can respond really well to the child. It's family involved. And what I mean by that is it recognises that a child's identity and their very sense of who they are is tied very closely to their family and community and culture. And so no matter the type of care that they're in, it's really important that we're supporting a child's connection to those things, to their family, community and culture. It's competency centred. So it recognises children need to be given opportunities and supported to learn skills, to learn knowledge, and to develop attitudes that are going to serve them well as children, but again, all the way into their adult lives as well. And it's also ecologically oriented. And what that means is it recognises that the environment that children are raised in and the role models that they have around them can have a really significant and influential impact on the people that those children become. So that is a very short, brief, nutshell version of care, which helps drive the work that we do at Life Without Barriers in foster care. So let's talk about children in care. This is the stuff that people are really curious about. So before I talk to the slide, I'll just point out Kieran on the left-hand side here with his lovely doggy. So Kieran has a full-time job. He's an adult now and he's looking forward to buying a house in the future. Good for him. He came into foster care at the age of 12 and he remembers that his foster carer has played a really big part in who he is today. So that's a really nice way to ground what we're talking about here. So there's lots of different reasons why children come into care. They can come from any culture, they can come from any suburb, any corner of our community. Every child has a unique story and a completely different set of circumstances. But what we know is that almost all of them come from complex family and social situations where they might have suffered neglect, trauma, or abuse. So that's sort of the common factors that we see very often. So children in care are aged anywhere between 0 and 18 years. They come from a range of different cultural backgrounds, and all of them have families who are important to them. So that's a really important thing to keep in mind. They've all also suffered trauma of some sort. So just being removed from your family of birth causes trauma. Some children have been abused in different ways, so perhaps physically, emotionally, or sexually. Others have witnessed really horrible things happen to the people they love, like witnessing domestic violence in their home. And others still may have been neglected. So what we mean by that is they haven't been given the care and support and age appropriate supervision to help them grow to the level that we would expect them to be at for their age. So that's a little bit about children in care and the stories that they're coming from. So with all of that in mind, now that we know a little bit about the children in care, obviously we need carers with attributes and beliefs that we know are good for children to help those children develop and heal and grow from their experiences. So that's what we're going to talk a little bit about now. So firstly, I'd like to introduce you here to Gary and Shell on the left-hand side. Now, these are two of our carers from Tasmania, and they provide long-term care for 6 to 11-year-olds. They live on a little farm out in Tassie, and they have grown their own biological children up, and now they care for 5 foster children who they currently have in their care. So they're really heroes, Gary and Shell. So those 5 children are siblings, and they have been allowed to be kept together and live under the same roof as their brothers and sisters and grow up together. And I think that's something that's incredible and really special that Gary and Shell offer. The next story in the middle here is Stacey, who isn't a foster carer, but did grow up in foster care. So she's now studying at uni, wanting to become a social worker. And she talks about how important it was to her that her foster family made her feel part of their family. I think that's a really important thing to hold on to as well. And then we've got the lovely Belinda over here on the right-hand side. And Belinda provides short-term care types for 5 to 18-year-olds. So Belinda works full-time. She's a single carer, and she works in a very demanding job, but that hasn't stopped her from being a foster carer and living her dream. So she started off providing weekend respite and emergency care, so those shorter care types, and then she moved into providing short-term care as well. So that's just some of the stories about some of our carers and our care leavers, and a little bit about some of the things we know that we need from foster carers. You'll notice there's a little read more tab at the bottom of all of our stories. That's because all of them are featured on our Life Without Barriers website. So I do encourage you to go along and have a look. There's so many stories just like these ones in full that you can read and learn a little bit more about foster care. So let's talk now about who can be a carer. And hopefully by the end of this evening, what you'll have learned is that it's likely that you can. So carers can be married, single, they might live with others, they might be divorced, they can be from any background or culture. Really what we're interested in is your ability to care for and nurture a child. That's what really matters to us. So there's a few eligibility criteria that we do need to meet. So you need to be over 21 years of age, and you do need to have relevant life experience. And what I mean by that is you need to have met a child and interacted with a child. You need to have a baseline understanding of some of the things that children need. You do need to be well and healthy because foster care is demanding and we need to know that you're up for it. You do need to have a regular source of income. You can be from any cultural background. You might be single or in a relationship. That's totally fine. You do need to be willing to undergo background checks. And what I mean by background checks is things like a police check, a working with children check, all of that sort of stuff, because that really helps us be very sure that we're only looking at very safe and appropriate people to place children with. So a little bit about your home and family. So you might be a parent or you might not. That's totally fine. You can rent or own your own home. You do need to have a spare room and you do need to have a car and a license. So those are 2 really important requirements. And everyone that's in your home needs to be willing to participate in the assessment process to some degree. And I'll talk a little bit more about that in detail in a second. So let's talk now about some of the questions that Louise and I hear all the time from people who are wanting to be foster carers. So this one comes up a lot. I'm single, can I still be a foster carer? a resounding yes to that one. You absolutely can. And in fact, about half of our carers across Australia are single people. So it's an absolute yes from us. Families come in all shapes and sizes, and foster families need to as well. We're a same-sex couple. Can we foster? Yes, again, to that one, you absolutely can. It really doesn't matter if you're single, married, in a de facto relationship, a same-sex attracted relationship. Again, what's really important is that you're able to provide a stable, loving home to children and young people, and you meet the eligibility criteria. That's what's really important. I'm not a parent. Can I still be a foster carer? Yes, you can. We undertake a really thorough assessment process with you. And in that process, what we're looking for is some of the skills that you might already have to care for children and some of the things that you might need to still develop. And once we've done that assessment, we then make recommendations about the kinds of children you should or shouldn't care for. So what ages and needs level is appropriate for yourself and for your household. So there's just a little checklist here of things that great foster carers have. It's things like patience and understanding, acceptance, availability, commitment, flexibility, time to give, and a commitment to helping children maintain family relationships with their family of birth. So all of those things are really the very important big ticket items that we're looking for. So some more questions about your home. Do I need to have a spare room? Yes, you do need to have a spare room for the child to live in. This helps children to feel safe and secure in your home and in your family. And it tells that child that they belong. They have a place in your home that's theirs. And that's why it's really important. Do I need to own my own home to be a foster carer? Absolutely not. Certainly in the city of Melbourne, we'd run out of people very quickly because that's pretty tricky to own your own home in Melbourne at the moment. So you absolutely don't need to. You might rent, you might be in public housing, you might have a mortgage. If you do own your own home outright, good for you. That's incredible. Really, all we need you to do is to demonstrate that your premises are safe and suitable to care for a child in. So that's what we're interested in. If you do rent or you're in public housing, you may need to seek approval to make sure it's okay to have children coming and staying in your home or have extra children staying with you. So obviously we don't have the resources to follow up with everyone's landlord individually. So you'd need to do that on your own. So a little bit about your family. So can I have my own children and then foster other children? Yes, you absolutely can. So something we look at closely in the assessment process is your own family situation. And we take that into account when we're recommending the ages and needs level of children that you might foster. So we have a general guide at Life Without Barriers of placing children in your care who are younger than your youngest child. So if you have a 7-year-old child, that's your youngest, we would try and place children with you who are 5 and younger, just to let your youngest child be a little bit older. That gives us the best chance of success and allows carers to focus on each child and address their individual needs. The really important thing is that your children need to be old enough to tell you if things aren't working well for them. So obviously children who aren't talking yet can't do that. And we suggest that you might wait a couple of years if you do have very young children at home and consider just postponing your application for a little while and let them get a bit older. So will all my family be involved in the assessment process? Yes, they will. So to some degree. So everyone who lives at home needs to be involved. So there's a number of different ways that we assess and things that we do in an assessment. So some of them are formal assessments like the police checks and working with children checks I mentioned earlier. We do a medical check and we do referee checks. And then there's the more informal parts of the assessment, which is basically just where we come and we have a chat with yourself, many chats. And then we also have discussions with the other people who live in your home. So for example, if you have children living at home, your allocated assessor might ask them how they feel about another child coming to stay with them, how they feel about sharing their toys. That always gets some pretty interesting responses. How they feel about sharing mummy and daddy's time with other children. And we'll also ask them about what routines and consequences and discipline are used in your home And we probably won't ask them like that. If they're very young children, we might ask them to draw a picture of their home and ask them what are your favourite things about living here. So we're pretty good at doing age appropriate questioning of children in the household. Really, what we're doing in that assessment process is we need to make sure that everyone in your home is ready and prepared for the significant changes that foster care brings. That's what we're doing. We have a duty of care to make sure everyone's ready. So that's what the assessment process is there for. Some more questions that we receive about the children in care. This is a really good question. How are children matched to foster carers? So it is a matching process. There's a method to this madness. So as I've mentioned a few times now, we complete a thorough assessment of yourself and your family and your household. And from that, we decide what type of children are probably the best for you to be caring for. So we have all of that information about you. When a child needs a placement, we receive some information about them, and we look at all of that information, all the information about you and your family and household, and all our other available carers as well. And then we make a decision about what's the most compatible match, what's the best chance of success here. And that's how we match children together with foster carers. Can I choose the age and gender of the child? Part of the assessment process is talking about things like this with you. So some people have a really particular idea about the age and gender of a child that they might care for. Sometimes that's based on their own life or parenting experiences, and that's why they feel strongly about it. Other people don't really mind at all, and they're open to lots of ages and all genders. I suppose the important thing here to think about is if you're very strict and rigid in your preferences, it makes it a little bit hard for us. So if you're saying, look, I only want to care for children who are aged between 2 and 3, and they have to be a boy and they have to have blue eyes and blonde hair, it sort of makes us think, well, are we going to be able to place many children with you? And that can affect our decision about whether we proceed. So it's just important to demonstrate some flexibility, but your wishes and views and comfort level will always be taken into account as well. So a bit more about the children in care. Do children in care have ongoing relationships with their family of birth? The answer to this one sometimes surprises people. Yes, they do. Where it's safe and appropriate, we absolutely want to keep children connected to their parents and their family members, because their parents and their family members love them and care about them and want to see that they're doing well and that they're safe. Parents and family members can also have really important information about children that can be helpful for us to know and for our foster carers to know. So it's important we stay linked in with them. It's really important that foster carers are able to support positive and ongoing relationships between the children they're caring for right now and those children's family members. And again, that's only where it's safe and appropriate. So if there's ever a risk or a safety issue, that wouldn't be the case. So just to be really clear about that. So what happens if the placement isn't working out? Obviously, it's not in a child's best interest to be put into foster care and then bounce around to lots of different foster care placements. So we always want placements to last as long as they possibly can and to go really well. Children can blame themselves if placements repeatedly break down. So that's just a really important thing to keep in mind. You, as a foster carer, will have access to a whole care team that's wrapped around you to help you care for the child, and you'll always have training and support available to you. But ultimately, I mean, at the end of the day, if a placement really just isn't working out, it's going disastrously badly, we will just hope to find the best solution for you and for the child and for your family as well. So that's all we ever want to work towards. So a little bit about the process of becoming a carer. How long does the assessment process take? So if you're thinking about fostering, you probably have lots of questions for us, and we probably have lots of questions for you as an applicant as well. So it's really important that we have a process to work through all of those questions together. So the application process helps us do that, and it takes around 4 months. So if you decide at the end of this evening, I'm really keen, I'm going to go and submit an inquiry and I want to definitely be a foster carer. And if you do that today and everything goes well, there's no hurdles or roadblocks in the way, in 4 months' time, you could very well find yourself accredited and caring for children. So that's about how long it takes. And what is the process? What does it actually look like? So there's kind of 6 main stages, and they look like this. So firstly, there's your initial inquiry, which is where you might put your hand up. Maybe you'll do that tonight and say, yes, I would like to kind of find out more and see if this is right for me. We then do a home visit obviously not physically. We do that via Zoom at the moment and have done for a while. There's lots of paperwork to complete as well. And then you will book into your training. So it's really important we have well-trained, confident carers coming through the process. So you undergo about 16 hours of training, which really tells you lots of all the details about foster care and what you can expect as a foster carer. And that takes place over a couple of weeks. Again, it's occurring on Zoom at the moment on weekends and evenings. So it normally fits around people's lifestyles. And then after all that, if you decide, yep, I'm going to go ahead and be assessed now, you will undergo the assessment process. Your family will be involved, and you'll have an allocated assessor that comes and meets with you and your family a number of times over a period of weeks. Then they write a big long report about you and your family, which you read and approve before we then take it to the really exciting part, the approval panel, which is where we sit down with members of child protection and from our own agency, and we talk about what a wonderful carer you're going to be. And that's where we seek the big tick of approval and you become a foster carer as of that day. So that's how the process looks. So about the support that you can receive, that you can expect to receive when you are a foster carer. So it's really important that you leave this evening knowing that you're never just left to do it all alone as a foster carer. You do have a team wrapped around you, because we know that it can be tough. It can be really hard trying to care for children who've been through things that can be really hard to understand sometimes. So it's important that we have carers who feel supported and confident in their role, and that's what we strive to do. So it's just a little picture here of some of the different types of support that you can expect to receive as a foster carer. So there's ongoing training, specialist support, so things like clinicians that can come in and support you. There's a 24/7 on-call support number. That's a relief for some people to hear. So if things get really tough in the middle of the night, it's okay. There's always someone at the end of the phone that you can talk to, and it's one of our team who will know you and know the child that you're caring for. You are entitled to respite. So if you're providing short or long-term care, you can have some of those weekend breaks or school holiday breaks and know that you're sending the child off to stay with a safe and suitable respite carer. You are entitled to some financial support. The caveat I would have there is that it is quite minimal. So it is just a contribution toward the cost of raising the child. It's certainly not a get-rich-quick scheme. And you're also going to be part of carer networking events as well, in person when we can do them, but sometimes we have to do them on Zoom at the moment. And we really encourage carers to form supportive peer relationships with one another. That's something that can be a really important source of support for carers. So that's some of the support that you can expect to receive. And that brings us to the end of the frequently asked questions. So I'm going to check in on the chat box now and see if we have any questions. And Lou, have we got any questions there to answer?
No, Hannah. They obviously are a knowledgeable group.
Excellent.
Or they're too shy.
Yes, either or, and that's perfectly okay. And if you are feeling a little bit shy about asking questions now, please rest assured there's plenty of opportunities to ask them if you go through the process. This always happens on this slide, doesn't it, Lou? We say, oh, there's no questions, and then we get questions. Yes.
Yeah, which is great, it prompts them. Can I be a full-time carer if I'm over 60?
Oh, that's a great question. Yes, absolutely you can. So we have many carers who are around that age group and they do a fantastic job, and often they have the time and the energy to devote to being a foster carer. So absolutely you can be a full-time carer if that's your age.
And another one, if your spare room is currently a study / guest room, best bedroom, is that okay?
Yeah, so again, that should be fine. What we really would be looking at is if you're thinking you're going to provide short or long-term care for a child, for example, and you're still trying to use that room as a study or as an office while the child is trying to live in there, and that's supposed to be their space, we would just need to unpack how that's going to work. Is that going to help the child feel really welcomed? So that's a really common question that we get, Lou, at the moment with COVID, everyone working from home. Many guest bedrooms have been turned into studies. So
absolutely.
Yeah.
And we have a few more. Is it possible to foster children that are older than my youngest? He's 5, but I'm a high school teacher.
Right. So That's something that we could probably talk about, given that you do have some experience, older children and what they kind of function like. So that's something we could absolutely talk about. It's not a staunch black and white rule that they have, foster children have to be younger than your youngest. We would work that out in assessment and really talk about, what's safe and appropriate. And we'd obviously need to talk to your little one and make sure that they are feeling included in the decision making as well. But yes, absolutely, that's a possibility.
And how do you decide if my house is safe? What do you judge it on?
Great question. And I think people get a little bit nervous that we're sort of going to come in with a magnifying glass and say, oh, there's dust, you can't possibly be a carer. It's nothing like that. We have a really great checklist that we work through with you. So you see exactly what we're checking for. Sometimes we'll get you to come up through the house with us and do the check. Sometimes we do a virtual check first and get you to actually lead us through the house on Zoom. But basically, we're looking to make sure that anything that might be a hazard for the age groups that you're hoping to care for is taken care of in the home. So, are there trip hazards? Are there choking hazards if you're looking to care for younger children? Things like that. And then there's a few extra requirements like fire safety. So we need you to have either a fire blanket or an extinguisher in the home. The blankets cost $6 from Bunnings, so that's what I always suggest. So there's just a few little things like that, and really it's nothing major. It's just about having a conversation with you and mitigating risks in your home to make sure we've talked about them all before a child is there.
That's right. We don't care whether you make your bed or you have dishes in the sink. We don't care.
That's right.
Okay, if I wanted to foster siblings, so they could stay together, are they allowed to share a room?
Great question. And yes, where it's safe and appropriate, that is a possibility. So some siblings are fine to share a room together. And it's so important that we are able to create placements to keep siblings together. It's probably the thing that we struggle the most with, obviously being in inner city Melbourne, especially. Some people simply don't have stacks and stacks of spare rooms to keep children separately. So where siblings are approved to share a room, we can talk about that. Absolutely. And bunk beds are a popular item to purchase where that's the case.
Excellent.
And that's all the questions?
Yeah.
Wonderful. Some really good questions. Thank you. What a great group. Thanks so much for all of those questions. Really do appreciate it. And it shows that you're already thinking logistically about some of the realities of foster care, which is really encouraging for Louise and I to see. So where to from here? You've asked some questions tonight. You may have many more that you would like to ask as well. So really, tonight is the first of what we hope are many conversations with you about becoming a foster carer. So there's a couple of different places you might think about finding out more information. As I mentioned a little bit earlier, the foster care website at lwb.org.au is a great resource of more information, and you can find some lovely stories there along with our carer guide. There's so much knowledge and information you can get from that page. This evening, if you're feeling like you would like to continue the conversation with us, you might take a minute to fill in what's called a Call Me Back form. Lou is just going to pop the link for the Call Me Back form into the chat box for you. It literally takes less than a minute to fill in, doesn't it, Lou, that form?
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. So Lou's just finding the link and then we'll pop it in the chat box. I promise there is a real link. And what happens when you submit that Call Me Back form, you hit a button at the end and it just goes to one of our team members and they will give you a call in the next couple of days to talk about the next steps for you. So Lou will just post that one in a second. And the other option is if you're a personality type like me and you're too impatient to wait for someone to call you back, you might like to get in touch with us first, and that's perfectly welcome as well. So you might call us on our 1300 number or email us at carers@lwb.org.au. And don't worry, you don't need a pen to jot those down right now. You can find those details really easily at our website as well. So Lou's just popped Wonderful. Thanks, Lou. Lou's just popped the Call Me Back form link for you into the chat box. So feel free to fill one of those in if you would like. Otherwise, there's a number of ways you can get in touch with us at our website as well. So we do hope that you've learned a little bit this evening and that you know a bit more now than when you first arrived. We really love answering questions. It's genuinely the best part of the job. So please don't be shy about getting in touch with additional questions throughout the process. And what I will end on this evening, we have sort of moved through all of the content now, and hopefully you've got a little bit of an idea about whether you'd like to submit an inquiry. So I'd just like to bring it back to what foster care is all about. And this is our lovely Stacey, who grew up in foster care. And she remembers that without my carer, I wouldn't be where I am today. And I think really that's what it's all about here. So something to leave you with for this evening. Oh, another question, Lou?
Yes, we have had just an applicant just join, asking a question what the approval process is. Obviously, we will send the recording of tonight's info session across, yeah?
Yep, yeah, that's correct. So if someone's come along a little bit late, you are joining us just at the end. So we've moved through the presentation, but we will absolutely send a recording so you won't miss anything from this evening, and you'll be able to find out the information from there. So hopefully that's helpful.
Wonderful. I look forward to speaking to you again.
Lovely. Thank you so much, everyone. Really appreciate your time and commitment so far to the process, coming out to find out a little bit more. So we really hope to continue the conversation with you, and take care, stay warm.
Yeah, bye-bye now.
Thanks all.